What's so outstanding for me when I listen to your words and description is how much in my culture, for example, I refer to the word path as a kind of stay here and you manage your way to somewhere else, almost like the world is happening somewhere else. And what you describe is like everything in this world might be needed at a certain point. So that's so fascinating. It's so foreseeable and so unforeseeable at the same time. It's like, I do not know what you have to do. You might dive in the ocean. You might fast. You might eat too much. You might, whatever it is, every aspect in this world is a potential aspect of potential medicine composition for you in certain times. We do not know, but we know exactly how to know it when it's there. So that's a fascinating union of structure and surrender into the total unknown every time anew. It's such a mastery of listening, or almost guiding by following. It's amazing.
Yes, and that's why we would hope and we would work and prepare to make sure that we do know it as it's happening. Yeah. As I was saying earlier, that we do have the capacity to recognize the service, the offering, to recognize the medicine, to recognize the poison as the antidote, even as it's being meted out or administered. And this would be very rare for someone to recognize poison as the antidote to their own toxicity as it's being administered. This is so rare that in the yogic cosmology, the churning of the ocean of milk, that it was only one aspect of absolute consciousness that was able to ingest and assimilate the poison that threatened to destroy the whole world. There was only one aspect of absolute consciousness that has that capacity to recognize poison as consciousness itself, and therefore not toxic. And the only aspect of absolute consciousness that was able to recognize it as it was happening is consciousness, or the Lord of consciousness, or the overseeing, the overview of consciousness, the transcendent higher intelligence, the higher intellect, buddhi, the awakened consciousness will recognize the consciousness of poison as the antidote to their own toxicity, even as they are swallowing it. So that's, quite a preparation we're talking about to reawaken this higher intelligence in order to recognize, just as you said, in order to know it as it's happening. And so part of the preparation would even just to be faith, and even before faith, to have trust, and then to cultivate faith, or to have faith actually bud within you and blossom, in order for you to have that much preparation while you confront the potential poisoning of a risky, dangerous, terrifying, shocking, overwhelming experience. The experience is typical of this Kundalini awakening process. And this is why then in the culture that I have been born and raised into and initiated into, this would be the role of the chosen guru, is to encompass everything we have just been speaking about, which includes the one who will shock you, It includes the one who might raise up the potential of great danger, includes the one who embodies risk itself in a human form, so that if you confront it and if you train your nervous system to confront that fear, that risk over and over again with a human who has the capacity to respond accordingly, depending on where you are, how you are, what you are, why you are, who you are, both in a micro and macro sense, that they would then either hold you for long enough that you would feel conditionally loved, cell by cell, and relax and rest into that, as if there would be no sense of separation, no sense of actual death. You rest in the infinity. Or have the capacity to respond at any given moment or time to embody the isolator, the crusher, the destroyer, to embody any given aspect of absolute consciousness that you would be called into a relationship with, an interrelating with, in order to train and in order to prepare for the death. It's a shortcut. It's a privilege. Well, it was. And so my great interest is to understand more and more what happened in the West, what happened in the northern countries, what happened, and you talk about a distance that happened between a person and the source of their suffering. This is very interesting. What happened in the abuse of power? What happened for people to still be, or even just to even now start to realize the abuse, how deep it went at the hands of authority, and the layers and layers of healing that has to occur.
There is a fascinating footnote or questioning or image when I listen to you, besides many fascinating layers. It is like, normally I say, oh, we in Western cultures are traumatized by authorities, so no wonder that we are kind of triggered when somebody tries to be with us in a kind of traditional guru-disciple relationship. It's like I say, I'm triggered because I am traumatized by authority. But now when I listen to you, there is something underneath happening in me, like what made me be traumatized by authority if I'm not relating to my trauma only as a victim and something happened, but also how did I get into this place? And then maybe my being cut, like maybe the Western culture's mind, subconscious mind, is completely or almost completely cut from an inner access to this piece or aspect of consciousness that can, or that realizes this poison is the cure for my inner toxicity. So I subconsciously will relate to every teacher in the subconscious search for, can I have access to this poison, please, again, in order to become whole internally. So it's like me drawing into my life, longing for the poison in order to become whole. And then the whole thing ends up being a trauma and ends up being stuck and ends up being a loop and ends up being a dead end. That wasn't the initial motivation for this dynamics to happen. So I'm very fascinated about that. if my over and overly happening, I got abused by the next guru. I was unfree with the next teacher. I was fooled around. I was betrayed by the next spiritual satsang, whatever teacher. It happened over and over again. So I think spirituality is only taught by assholes. All of the story might be that underneath my cultural and my individual nervous system longs like crazy for the access again to the aspect in my consciousness that realizes this poison as the cure for this inner toxicity. So the more my Western spiritual scene wants to provide safety and wellness and love and light, the deeper I create the gap, the more I create the other side. Because the more I'm trying to restore the world of spirituality that can't exist like that, which is all aspects of consciousness that you need are here in the safe place, in the place of love and light and certainty. Or maybe not certainty, but of kind of, it's well dosed. And if I would add into this world of spiritual scene, and that makes me very eager and touched and alive in this moment also, and then there is the poison being included here on purpose and almost in the middle because that's needed the most in terms of reintegration, then we would embrace this aspect that otherwise stays as a shadow. And that also, just as the last thing that I want to share from here, it reminds me to this part of our conversation where I said I was so shy around who would want to hear about those bad news. And like one part of me wants to share about the bad news first. And one part is like, you can't do that. And I think that's exactly me being positioned where the whole culture is positioned. Between, I know I have to go there. I can't. I just can't. Who wants that? Who doesn't want that? Who wants that? Etc. etc. So this back and forth might be the fight in my nervous system. Showing in the individual drama, the collective drama, how stuck we are when we want to make it safe, because the illusion of safety had made it unsafe for all of us in horrific layers in the first place.
Yeah, I heard when you said loop, and loop is very much related to what I was saying earlier about the undigested, unprocessed waste product that hardens, it congeals, it gets sticky, and it congests, it blocks the channels and prevents circulation, which then leads to pain. And it leads to a system that will not be able to healthily prepare or be prepared for shock because of the compartments, because of the lack of the circulation, which would then allow energy to come to the places that most need it for the healing. We have to have that circulation. We have to first have the purification of the toxicity. Sometimes the poison is exactly the antidote. And if we don't even use the word poison and we use attributes or pure qualities of what might constitute a poison, they would typically be the qualities of hot, sharp, mobile, light, clear, and subtle, and rough sometimes. So some of these qualities mixed up, if we consolidate them, they would end up possibly being a substance that would generate intense reaction that might even cause such heat in the system that there would be a liquefaction, which would then allow for more mobility, a quicker elimination, a breakdown even of toxicity that would have before been too hard, too sticky to get to, especially if we only give a sweet, soft treatment. It would need something more sharp, some more friction, some more penetration, some more intensity, and certainly heat for metabolism. So looking at poison in that way, and to interrupt the loop, to have a pattern interrupt, there would often need to be more of this type of quality to cut and break up habitual ways of being, and to reabsorb the energies into a more holistic circulation of energies, more integrated into all parts of the whole equally. So that's one thing with the loop, that there has to be, as part of the preparation, this purification, which sometimes can feel intense. And also what you were talking about more recently, which now my mind isn't on. So if you remind me of the last thing that you were saying, it was important, and I'd like to continue on that note.
Yeah, the last thing that I was saying was me reminding another part of our conversation when I was sharing, okay, I become aware of the power and the beauty and the gratitude for death and shadow, etc. Who would want to listen to that? Like, who would want to listen to the bad news? And at the same time...
Oh, yes. Yeah, great. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that back. I love that. I love to, you know, the bad news. It reminds me of what I was saying earlier. The disclaimer, the warning, the note of caution, you know, which so often in ancient times, and even now in some ways, is a skull and crossbones, you know. The skull and bones is like, wow, here's the bad news, you could die. But it's exactly the expression, a functional expression of a warning, of a notice that allows you, therefore, to prepare accordingly for the shock. Could be an electric shock, could be an electric fence. And so I think today that could be an expression of great care, is to bring the bad news to the forefront, bring it to the front, place it on the table, cards on the table. Let's be transparent from the get-go. This is risky, this is dangerous, it can be shocking, and so let us expose ourselves more consciously to the information. Let's get educated, let's get contextualized in a way that makes most sense to us, so that we can take the next step with a sure footing.
It's also really taking the disciple serious. It's all, yeah, it's like, let's not talk about us being lowly initiates. We are not in kindergarten. You didn't call for kindergarten. You are not in kindergarten. I take you very serious. Your capacity for knowing all poles of your existence. So to some extent, I also see the great care and love and appreciation for the request. And I almost see, if I come as a spiritual disciple to a group and they are like, yeah, and love and light and all knew that, I feel like this compared to the skull would be a slap in my face. It's like nobody takes me serious. Nobody hears my soul calling for something that is about me. So stop underestimating me. I'm here for being cured from being underestimated, not for being like being treated as if being made of sugar. So there is this skull is something of, wow, maybe it's the first time that I enter a space where a conversation is happening with me on eye level. It is my skull in front of my eyes. This is like maybe the first time I feel taken serious by my life, by existence, by the outer world, by the human world. So, and it's not, I didn't know that, but when I listen to that and when I have this image, I become an immediate sense of the extraordinary amount of caretaking and love and respect and appreciation that comes from a setting that introduces me to the potential risk and death on this path. So exactly, the shocking guru feels like the first caretaker that doesn't let me down, that doesn't underestimate me, and that doesn't evaluate me as, you are my child.
Exactly. It's preparation.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's preparing me for the first steps with introducing me to the last step. It's also beautiful because it's not the little ABC in kindergarten, but it is about you are here for handling everything. And I'm here reminding you that you can already handle everything. So that's it. It's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly that. I mean, in my experience, I have to say, and you know, we have to remember, I don't get out that much. I'm most of the year in my jungle hut. I would say that this is rare. That it's rare, and I agree with you that it's still happening more than we might have thought. And I imagine that there are more and more people who will resonate to exactly what you just said.
And I think just maybe the last thing around that, this time is working towards that, because not seeing what becomes every day more obvious, like the filters are really crushed every day. It's so obvious that we are facing death. We are facing the collapse of systems on every level. So it's really, we are surrounded by psychic breakdowns just because of the amount of factors that changed over the course of the last month, with more tempo and with more uncertainty than any when before. So I think it really this running towards show me the poison in order to be cured from my toxicity. I have to find something in the darkness because darkness is coming into my life more and more every day. I think that's a super powerful global teaching coming from the unconscious dynamics that provide a great interest and gratitude in, we know what we are running from and what we are running towards. Let's talk about death. Let's sit and talk about death, the thing we know more about and less about than about anything else. So in an era of life being given birth to by a culture around death, I think that's, I mean, it's without doubt for me, that would be the highway if we go this way or another way, but I think this would be the highway. If I could choose between all those possible paths for this era in order to live life, I would say let's jump into death. It's just because I'm a coward, really. I'm just a coward. I don't want to suffer. So let's do it the death way. I would always choose that. It's so clear to me. Everything else is such a, oh, okay. Yeah, it's.
That's beautiful.
Oh. Such,
yeah.
I can't say thank you enough. And also like saying thank you to you as something like a bridge to such a treasure box of wisdom that is exactly talking to this age. I can't believe it. This timeless wisdom, thousands of years ago, people figured it out. And nowadays it's of such a service that I think it couldn't be replaced.
I agree. Yes.
So whatever you share nowadays, it's like you share it nowadays and you share it from times that could easily be also completely unknown to us. And I do not see anything that could, replace. I do not see this being replaced. I see great suffering where it's not provided.
Yes, and down the ages, this has been a mission, is to erase, is to literally vanish this medicine.
Yeah.
Because It's like what you were saying, that there's been a focus on distancing, creating distance from the source of suffering and therefore the source of any sensation.
Yeah.